Most people, when they drive past a mess, keep driving. It's not their problem. It's not their yard. It's not their city. But one afternoon in Michigan, a 43-year-old man in a corporate job pulled over at an abandoned preschool, and that single decision unraveled everything he thought his life was supposed to be. No camera, no plan, no audience, just a guy who couldn't stomach the idea of leaving it the way he found it. What happened next didn't make sense on paper. A professional with 2 decades in the automotive industry walked away from the salary, the security, and the career ladder to mow strangers' lawns in Detroit. And somehow, that became one of the most watched community channels on YouTube, closing in fast on 1 million subscribers. But the story behind Midlife Stockman isn't just about grass and garbage bags. It's about a man who spent 20 years climbing the wrong mountain, hit a wall he couldn't ignore, and chose the harder road when the easier one was right there in front of him. This is the story most of his subscribers don't know, and it starts long before the first video was ever filmed. For 20 years, Sean Stockman did everything right. He showed up, put in the hours, and built a career inside one of the most demanding industries in America, automotive. On the surface, it looked exactly like success was supposed to look. Steady paycheck, professional respect, a desk he'd earned. By most people's standards, he had nothing to complain about. But that's the thing about a life that looks fine from the outside. It doesn't always feel fine from the inside. Sean has spoken openly about the quiet unraveling that was happening beneath the surface, something he describes as imposter syndrome. Despite 2 decades in the industry, despite the titles and the tenure, he never fully shook the feeling that he was in the wrong place, that the version of himself sitting in that office was a costume, not the real thing. He was doing the job. He just wasn't living for it anymore. And it showed. The people closest to him at work started to notice, not in a dramatic way. There was no blow-up, no performance review that went sideways. It was subtler than that. The energy wasn't there. The drive had gone quiet. He was doing the minimum at a job that used to demand everything from him, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he already knew why. What made it complicated was that he didn't hate the people around him. He's been clear about that. The colleagues, the environment, none of that was the problem. The problem was that he had found something else that made him feel alive, and no amount of professionalism could close that gap once he'd seen it. Here's what nobody tells you about corporate burnout. It doesn't always look like a breakdown. Sometimes it looks like a guy sitting at a perfectly normal desk, doing a perfectly adequate job, quietly disappearing from his own life one Monday at a time. Sean Stockman was that guy, and for a long time he had no idea what to do about it. But something was already building on the weekends. Something raw, unpolished, and completely outside the world of quarterly targets and conference calls. And it was about to change everything. There's a moment in most people's lives where the thing they've been quietly avoiding finally steps into the room and demands to be dealt with. For Sean, that moment came from the last place he expected, his own bosses. They'd noticed, of course they had. The man who used to give everything to that job was visibly running on something less than that, and the people above him had picked up on it. In most workplaces, that conversation ends one way. You get called in, you get the talk, and you either course correct or you don't. Sean was bracing for exactly that. What he got instead stopped him cold. His bosses had seen the videos, the weekend cleanup work he'd been filming and posting, the overgrown yards, the neglected lots, the before and afters that were starting to find an audience online. Instead of treating it as a distraction, they told him he had something, not in a vague, polite way. They looked at what he was building on the side and told him directly, "This is worth pursuing." That's a rare thing. Most people don't get that kind of permission from the world they're trying to leave. And yet here it was, coming from the very people who had every reason to pull him back in. But permission and courage are 2 different things. Sean has talked honestly about how terrifying that leap felt. Walking away from 2 decades of stability, a guaranteed income, and everything that came with it to become, for the first time in his adult life, fully self-employed. There was no safety net, no corporate structure to fall back on, just him, his equipment, his camera, and whatever he could build with his own hands. His wife believed in it, his friends could see what was happening with the channel, the support was real, but knowing people believe in you doesn't make the jump any less frightening when you're standing at the edge. He jumped anyway, and the moment he did, the channel stopped being a weekend hobby. It became the mission, the thing he'd been unknowingly building toward through 2 decades of doing work that never quite fit. What came next, though, had actually started long before the camera ever came out. Before the channel, before the subscribers, before any of it, there was just a man driving through Detroit who couldn't keep his eyes forward. Sean has told this story before, and it's one of those moments that sounds almost too simple to be the origin of something this big. He was driving past an abandoned preschool. The property was a mess, overgrown, neglected, the kind of place that had clearly been forgotten by everyone responsible for it. Most people slow down, take a look, shake their head, and keep moving. That's the normal response. That's what the situation asked for. Sean pulled over. No camera, no plan to post anything, no thought of an audience or a brand or a YouTube channel, just a guy who looked at something that needed doing and decided he was the one who was going to do it. He got out and he got to work. That single, unplanned stop is the entire foundation of everything that came after. Not a business strategy, not a content idea, a man who couldn't drive past a mess without doing something about it. What's important to understand about that moment is what it wasn't. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't a pivot. It wasn't someone who sat down and mapped out a niche in the creator economy and decided property transformations were an underserved market. It was completely instinctive, and that instinct is exactly what audiences would eventually respond to in the millions, because you can't fake that. Viewers are remarkably good at detecting when someone genuinely cares about what they're doing versus when someone is performing care for the camera. Sean wasn't performing anything that day. There was no camera. There was just the work and the quiet satisfaction of leaving something better than he found it. That phrase, better than he found it, would go on to become the heartbeat of everything the channel stands for. The sign-off he uses to close nearly every video. Not perfect, but better. It started at an abandoned preschool on a random afternoon in Michigan, and once he started, he found he couldn't stop. He just needed a way to bring people along for it. Most people who decide to start a YouTube channel spend weeks overthinking it. The right camera, the right microphone, the right lighting setup, the right editing software. They convince themselves the gear is the barrier between where they are and where they want to be. Sean Stockman had none of that, and it turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened to him. When he started filming the cleanups, the setup was about as basic as it gets. A phone, a tripod, free editing software he already knew how to use from his years in video production. That was it. No studio, no crew, no polished intro sequence, just a camera pointed at a yard, a man who knew how to work, and whatever story was waiting inside the property he'd shown up to transform. And here's the thing, it worked. Not despite the simplicity, but because of it. Sean came from a background in professional video editing. He'd spent years in the wedding industry where production value was the whole point. He knew exactly what a polished, well-produced video looked like. He chose not to make that, whether that was a conscious decision or just the natural result of working alone outdoors with no budget. The effect was the same. The rawness of the footage matched the rawness of the work itself. The sweat, the debris, the genuine reactions of homeowners who weren't expecting anyone to show up at their door. There's a reason that landed with people. YouTube in 2024 and 2025 was saturated with overproduced content. Channels with cinematic drone shots and color-graded thumbnails and perfectly scripted emotional moments. Audiences had developed a sharp instinct for when something was being manufactured for them. Sean's videos had none of that texture. What they had instead was authenticity, and on a platform drowning in performance that was rarer and more valuable than any camera upgrade could ever be. He wasn't trying to look like a YouTuber, he was just trying to document the work. And that distinction, as small as it sounds, is exactly what separated him from everyone else trying to do the same thing. The audience noticed, and then the algorithm did too. Showing up uninvited to clean a stranger's property sounds straightforward on paper. In practice, it's a lot more complicated than that. Detroit is a city with a complicated history. Decades of economic decline, neglected infrastructure, and neighborhoods where residents have learned the hard way to be suspicious of people they don't recognize doing things they don't understand. Sean wasn't showing up with a logo on his truck or a permit in his pocket. He was just a guy with equipment, working on properties that weren't his, and not everyone who saw that was comfortable with it. The police were called on him more than once, not always in a hostile way. Sometimes it was simply a neighbor who saw a stranger on a property and didn't know what to make of it, but the result was the same. Work stopped, explanations had to happen, And on a platform where the camera is always rolling, those moments ended up in the videos. What's interesting is how Sean handled them. There was no defensiveness, no confrontation, no moment where he played the victim for the audience. He explained what he was doing, let the situation resolve itself, and got back to work. That response, calm, grounded, unbothered, told viewers more about the character of the man behind the channel than any transformation video ever could. Then there were the physical risks. Working alone on neglected properties isn't glamorous work, it's dangerous. Overgrown lots hide debris, broken glass, uneven ground, and worse. Sean documented a chainsaw close call that left him visibly shaken, a reminder that the work he was doing carried real consequences if something went wrong. No crew, no safety team, just him and whatever he ran into on the job that day. But none of it made him stop. If anything, those moments became part of what made the channel feel real. Because anyone can film a clean transformation on a sunny afternoon. It takes something different to keep showing up in difficult neighborhoods, deal with whatever gets thrown at you, and close every video with the same quiet phrase, "Not perfect, but better." That consistency, under pressure, is what started building something much bigger than a cleanup channel. For a long time, the channel grew the way most honest things grow. Slowly, steadily, and without any dramatic moment you could point to and say that was it. Sean was posting consistently, the community was building, and the subscribers were coming. But the numbers, while encouraging, weren't extraordinary. He was doing the work, and the work was finding its people, just not all of them, not yet. Then 2024 hit, and something shifted. The algorithm that had been quietly observing suddenly started paying attention in a very different way. The property transformation videos, the long, unhurried, deeply human stories of yards brought back from the edge, began landing in front of audiences who had never heard of Midlife Stockman. And those audiences stayed. They watched to the end. They came back. They sent the videos to people they knew. The engagement numbers that platforms use to decide what gets pushed and what gets buried were doing exactly what they needed to do. By March 2025, Sean had crossed 600,000 subscribers. By July of that same year, he was past 800,000. For context, that kind of growth in that short a window doesn't happen by accident. It happens when content connects with something people didn't know they were looking for until they found it. The mainstream press started showing up too. Local Detroit news covered him. He was given a nickname, Detroit's Mr. Clean, by outlets that recognized what he was doing for the city's neighborhoods. Reporters who showed up expecting a quirky human interest story found something harder to categorize. A man with a genuine mission, a growing audience, and a philosophy that didn't fit neatly into any existing box. What the surge revealed was something Sean had understood from the beginning, but that the wider world was only just catching up to. People are hungry for content that makes them feel something real. Not manufactured drama, not carefully engineered emotion. Just the unfiltered experience of watching someone do good work for the right reasons day after day, regardless of whether the cameras are making it worth their while. The cameras were making it worth everyone else's while, and the channel wasn't slowing down. It was closing in fast on a milestone that very few creators ever reach. At some point, something changed in how people related to the channel. It stopped being a place they visited to watch satisfying transformation videos and became something they felt a part of. That shift, from audience to community, is one of the rarest things that can happen to a YouTube channel, and for Midlife Stockman, it happened organically. Sean never set out to build a movement. He set out to clean up yards, but the people watching had started to see themselves in what he was doing. The philosophy of showing up, working hard, and caring about the people around you. That resonated in a way that went well beyond lawn care. And when viewers feel that kind of connection, they don't just watch, they invest. The MLS community, as his audience came to call themselves, started doing exactly that. Through Patreon and merchandise, supporters began funding the operation in a direct and practical way, covering the cost of equipment, supplies, and resources that allowed Sean to keep his services completely free for the people who needed them most. The elderly, the disabled, single parents, residents in neighborhoods that had been overlooked for decades, people who had nobody else showing up for them. That funding model matters more than it might appear to on the surface. It means the channel isn't just entertainment, it's a functioning community support system. Every subscriber who buys a piece of merchandise or backs him on Patreon is directly contributing to someone in Detroit getting help they couldn't have afforded otherwise. The line between content creator and community organizer had blurred almost completely. And through all of it, Sean kept closing his videos the same way he always had. Not perfect, but better. 4 words that started as an honest acknowledgement that one person with a lawnmower can't fix everything, but became something much larger, a philosophy, a standard, a quiet argument against the paralysis of perfectionism that stops most people from doing anything at all. You don't have to solve the whole problem. You just have to make it better than you found it. That idea, more than any individual video or subscriber milestone, is what Midlife Stockman ultimately built. And it isn't finished yet. Sean Stockman is closing in on 1 million subscribers, not because he gamed an algorithm, hired a team of editors, or reverse engineered what YouTube wanted from him, because he pulled over at an abandoned preschool one afternoon and refused to keep driving. What followed was 20 years of corporate life that never quite fit, a breaking point that somehow came wrapped in encouragement, a phone propped on a tripod in someone's neglected backyard, and a city that didn't always make the work easy. None of it was part of a plan. All of it was necessary. The story of Midlife Stockman is uncomfortable in the best possible way because it asks a question most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What would you be doing right now if the salary and the security and the expectations of everyone around you weren't part of the equation? Sean Stockman found his answer with a shovel in his hands and grass up to his knees in Detroit. Not perfect, but better. And maybe that's the most radical thing a person can do in a world obsessed with perfection. Just show up, do the work, and leave every place a little better than you found it.